Hi, I'm Kevin Bright, one of the executive producers of Friends. The opening title sequence was shot on the Warner Brothers Ranch in Burbank, California, and the New York skyline was matted in later. Now, this is the only episode of Friends where you'll see the title sequence in its entirety. The reason for this is that we felt that this would be the title sequence for every single episode of the show for the life of the series. However, when NBC saw the sequence for the first time, they felt it was sending the audience a negative message. We're young, we're hip, we're dancing in a fountain, and you can't play with us. What they wanted us to do was to go back to our original presentation, which they saw, where the title sequence was composed of pulls from the show. We decided to compromise, and for the future of Friends, every episode after that, there were some pulls from the show and a lot of the original title sequence.
Hi, this is David Crane, and I co-created Friends with Marta Kauffman, and I executive produce it with Marta and with Kevin Bright. Marta and I came up with this idea because we wanted to write something about our time in New York. We spent the first 10 years out of college living in New York, and we had a group of friends, and we were all very tight, and we look back on those years really fondly. And we wanted to do a show about that time when you've left home and you've left college and you don't know what you're doing, but it's okay because you've got these group of people around you who are just terrific and make it all right.
I'm Marta Kauffman, one of the executive producers, and created the show with David Crane. We were just talking the other day about how difficult some things are to write, and how this pilot wrote itself. Sort of meant to be. Having come off of doing Dream On, a show with one person, wanting to do an ensemble show, and David and I were sort of part of a group of 6 in New York when we were in our 20s, although people in their 20s now were different than what we were like. When we were writing the pilot, we said we felt like anthropologists. We kept having to ask 20-year-olds, what's it like to be in your 20s now? Still the same as it was then? I mean, we were in our 20s pre-AIDS. Things were different. We were starting to talk about something with an ensemble and people whose lives, their choices were still in front of them. And I remember driving by a place called the Insomnia Cafe here in Los Angeles and thinking, that's a fun reference, sort of a over-caffeinated feel for a show. That would be fun.
We had the idea that the show was going to be, as we called it, over-caffeinated, because we figured we're in a coffee house. Let's give it this kind of over-caffeinated pace where you're cutting back and forth between 3 stories, so it doesn't feel like your traditional sitcom with one big A story and maybe a B story. The feeling was we have 6 characters, and to serve all the characters and the actors, we're going to need to tell a bunch of stories in each show. And the other thing that makes it unconventional is that it is a true ensemble. There is no lead. I mean, even Seinfeld, which was an ensemble, it was Seinfeld. Cheers, you had Sam Malone at the center of it. There is no Sam Malone. There is no Seinfeld. It was a true ensemble. Any week, any 2 or 3 or 4 characters carry the weight, and it's never the same from week to week.
The most exciting thing about the original concept of Friends to me, it was absolutely something I had not seen on television to that point. Young people in their 20s, in prime time, living away from a family situation. It was a time in your life where your friends were your extended family. And that was basically the theme of the show, Friends as Family.
It's interesting. The opening sequence was tricky and unusual for a sitcom because it's just these short sequences with people talking, people sitting and talking. There's no action until well into the first act of the show. It's just these little hits which tell you who these people might be, and that's enough because I think a really good sitcom is about the characters and it's less about the plot. We started with the idea of this coffee house and people sitting around and just talking, and that these conversations informed the stories.
The pilot of Friends was over 8 minutes long from the airtime that it was delegated. There are many lines in these opening scenes which were actually not seen in the original pilot.
We started with the characters, and it's funny, I've recently looked at the original pitch for the show, and it's remarkably close to the show that we ended up doing. There were some differences when we originally pitched it. We imagined that the principal love connection would be between Joey and Monica. This was before we cast it, before we wrote it. We imagined this sort of hot young actor, and Monica was sort of this woman who hadn't found luck in relationships, and we thought, well, that's where it's going to go. And it wasn't until we started getting into the actual writing of the script that we realized, no, it's over here.
The Ross and Rachel thing, we knew about it, but didn't realize what incredible chemistry that would generate. And suddenly that took the focus for that first season, for a lot of that first season. You know, and then when storylines start to work, the show takes over and tells you what to write.
There's a lot more of this sort of thing where they're watching TV and making fun of it in the first season of the show. As time went on, the episodes became more story intensive, and there just isn't time anymore. And also the episodes got shorter. We lost a minute or two as time went on to advertising. So there's a lot less of downbeats where characters are just talking and making jokes that aren't on story. Pretty much everything's on story now. We'll shoot downbeats that aren't on story and end up cutting them in post because there just isn't time. It's the first thing you get rid of.
Ooh, she should not be wearing those pants.
The Friends apartment, in the designing of it, we knew we didn't want it to look like every other standard sitcom apartment that had been done on television to that point. The main thing that they had in common is the backgrounds would always be a neutral color because of the flatter lighting that is used in sitcoms to accommodate the multiple camera angles. They tended to design the sets with neutral backgrounds so that the performers would pop out more. This, to us, was sort of against the whole idea of why is it called colored television. So we wanted an apartment that reflected the sensibility of these 20-somethings and went with a lot of bright colors. You can see the blue on the kitchen cabinets, the purple on the living room walls, the red on the comforter. You know, we just wanted color to pop out everywhere, even on the actors' clothing.
I think there is a reason that the hairstyles and the sets worked their way, and the furniture worked their way into the pop culture. And I think it's because people liked them so much and wanted to be their friends and wanted to be like them, and felt like their lives were like that, and that, you know, they had this or wanted to have this. I think not everybody, you know, marries a woman who decides she's a lesbian, but I think many of the themes are universal. Losing someone is universal. The thing we always say, you know, living this time in your 20s when your friends are your family. We've all been through that period before you sort of work your way back to family. Anyway, so I think that's part of it. It's just wanting to be like these people. And they're beautiful and they're funny and you know, who wouldn't want that?
Right across the hall. And he's away a lot.
In the background, because of money problems, we were unable to create a look out the window that was very impressive. You notice that those are painted drops back there. They're not lit. They don't have the dimensional quality that the show later on. As a matter of fact, you know, when the budget came down, we couldn't even afford curtains for back there.
6:30? Buzz him in.
Who's Paul? Paul the wine guy?
We auditioned, I believe the exact number was 1,047 people. Everybody from every race, every size. And these were the people who made it the funniest.
Marta Kauffman and myself did most of the initial screening of candidates for the cast of Friends. It was a process that went over 3 months where literally we saw hundreds and hundreds of actors. And there was even a point during the casting process where we weren't even sure the script was funny anymore because so many people had come in and done it and were unable to make it come to life. The first person that we had approached was David Schwimmer because we had an experience with him in another pilot that we did couples. He went to the network on that show but didn't get the part.
There was something so unique about him, and he just stuck in our heads. And when we wrote Ross, he was in our heads. And we offered this to him. He was in Chicago, I think, doing a play. And we were like, you know, sending him flowers and lunch and deli and, you know, whatever we could do. to get him to agree to do this show.
Over and over and over again till it starts to get a little red.
Lisa Kudrow was the second person that we cast after David Schwimmer. We were familiar with Lisa from her part on Mad About You as the ditzy waitress Ursula. When she did Phoebe, again, it was one of those few moments where Marta and I were able to say, this is the person. With Lisa, there was no conflict except that Friends, when it was finally scheduled, was going to air after Mad About You, and Lisa wanted to continue her role as Ursula on that show because nobody knew where Friends was going, and it had worked out well for her, and she was popular on the show. So we allowed her to continue that, and later came up with the storyline that the reason on the same night of the week you could see Lisa Kudrow on two shows is basically Ursula was Phoebe's twin sister. And with the permission of the writers of Mad About You, this was something that we continue to do now into our 8th season. This scene is a scene that was not included in the original pilot, mainly because it had both technical problems and it was a scene that wasn't on story. So even though it exposed Phoebe's character in a more extensive way by revealing her as this sort of guitar-playing street urchin, we took it out of the original episode. When we decided to put it back in for a special viewing of the pilot, we actually had to bring Lisa in 5 years later to loop herself singing the song. The technical problem with the scene was the platforms that the people were walking on were hollow, and the extras were so noisy and they were going by her in the mic that every time you tried to raise her voice, you also raised the footsteps. So we had to go back and loop the scene.
Feel my legs.
The part of Joey was much more limited in the pilot than what it ultimately became in the series. Joey was kind of just the womanizing guy. If any of our characters fell into an area of being stereotypical, probably Joey was the only one. But when we had the auditions at the network and Matt finally won the role, what became apparent after we started the series was that Matt's great diversity as an actor, and beyond willing to play this real guy's guy, he was an actor that showed he was really able to display heart. And that was the focus of Joey later on in the series, is how much heart this guy had.
I always assumed Chandler was going to be the easiest role to cast. He's a wise guy. He's sarcastic and has a joke. And we saw guy after guy after guy, all talented, not all talented, but many talented. It just wasn't popping. It didn't feel fresh, and it wasn't even that funny. And we had known about Matthew from before this. We had done the show Dream On, and he had guest starred on it. And we thought he was great, but he already had another pilot. And you don't want to cast someone in your show who's got another pilot because you're in second position, and if that pilot goes, then you're screwed. His name kept showing up in the list, and we kept saying, no, we don't want him in second position. We don't want him if he's got another pilot. And then we found out that the pilot was about baggage handlers in the year 2020 or something. And we went, you know what, that's a risk we're going to have to take. And so we cast him. The first time we heard him read, we just looked at each other and went, oh my God, so the writing doesn't suck. It's, we just hadn't found the guy yet. Jennifer also was in second position to a series that was actually on television. And so we took the risk that it might not stay on television because she was worth it. She was that wonderful. And the idea of going with someone who didn't bring to it what she brought to it, we thought, let's roll the dice.
I'm only 26 and I'm divorced. Shut up.
They all have such amazingly distinctive voices. Right, it's the pilot, and they're completely fully formed. And you hear Matthew talking, and no one ever sounded like that on TV before. He's got such a distinctive rhythm.
I've had the love of a woman for 4 years. 4 years.
I've always connected with Chandler in terms of his sense of humor, and Ross, because he's always trying to do the right thing. And there's kind of a woebegone quality about him that I can relate to. And Marta has a lot of Monica in her.
I see myself, I guess, closest to Monica. A little neurotic, very perfectionist, a little competitive, a little control freak. A little bit of that. And I'm not as ethereal as Phoebe, but I have the tendency towards the weird stuff, the spirits and that side of life. I really wanted to bring that new age character in. I mean, not like David didn't, but it meant a lot to me just because it seemed like it was part of what's going on in the world these days.
I honestly don't know if I'm hungry or horny.
And stay out of my freezer.
We originally went to Courteney to play Rachel, and she said, I really want to do this show, but I want to play Monica. And it was so not what was in our heads. We saw Monica as a much more like Janine Garofalo when we originally wrote her. Again, things happen for a reason, and thank God, because she made it work.
Well, ever since she left me...
There's a spit take coming out that we must have done 140
I
times.
haven't been able to perform sexually.
The story of Monica and Paul the Wine Guy was the most controversial part of the original pilot of Friends. There was a lot of concern on the part of the network that by Monica sleeping with a guy on the first date, it said negative things about her character. And they became concerned to the point where after we shot the show in front of the audience, a questionnaire was passed out basically evaluating Monica's behavior and questioning whether the audience thought she was a slut by sleeping with a guy on the first date, and whether this had a negative impact on their impression of the character. Fortunately, the audience came to our side and educated NBC on contemporary moral standards, and all of the material with Monica and Paul the Wine Guy stayed.
But Joni loved Chachi.
I was just thinking, the first rehearsal I went to, the first time I saw the six of them together, I got chills up and down my spine. You never know if something is going to be successful or not. But there was magic with the six of them. It just felt like, the stars were aligned and we were given these six incredible actors and it looked like they'd been together forever.
When I look at the pilot, I'm really proud, first of all, that it's all there. Those are the same characters that are on the show now. That we had a fairly clear vision, which you don't always have, and certainly we've done pilots where we didn't. But clearly here, these characters arrived full-blown, and I'm really proud of that.
We always wanted music to be an important part of Friends. In episodes to come, we would use music by R.E.M., The Pretenders, Bare Naked Ladies, Smash Mouth, U2. We just wanted the musical taste of the characters to be reflected in the music in the show.
She looks different. Jennifer's changed a lot over the years. She's gone from, I think, becoming a girl to a woman or something. She looks so, again, naive, innocent.
The choice of Jim Burrows directing was a no-brainer because Jim was very well known as executive producer and director of Cheers, which had been for all of us one of our favorite shows on television, and also Taxi. And Marta and David and I had really just been starting out and doing multiple camera sitcom. This was only our second one, and having the opportunity to have the experience of somebody like Jimmy, who had done so many with him, was an amazing thing.
He was also instrumental in working with the six actors and making them feel like an ensemble. There's so much invention, like that little table move there. It's, we were very lucky.
Wow, they're in a different number apartment now. Only those internet people know that.
Going back to Jim Burrows, some of the things, looking at the scene that he contributed, originally there was just supposed to be 2 regular-sized small windows back there. He decided he wanted a big bay window so there would be a better view back there. And the other touch that he added to the apartment was a beam in the foreground that you'll see many times in the Monica's apartment scenes in this episode, and on and off again over the first 13. The reason for that being, Jimmy loved to have the foreground piece sort of cutting across the scene. Many other directors found that it just got in the way, so it sort of became a signature of Jimmy's. Every time he came back to the show, we added the beam back.
You guys all have jobs?
Originally, we were going to do this single camera. They all said no, thank God.
Having scenes with 6 actors all of them having to be covered at the same time and only having 4 cameras, told us that this was going to be a tough series to follow as far as keeping the cameras on the dialogue. I remember Jim Burrows saying to me while we were shooting the pilot, "This is the only show that has ever made my ears bleed."
Boy.
I can't think of too many changes we made while we were shooting the pilot. I think we do even more of that now, where you'll run a scene and you'll listen to the audience, and while you don't trust them entirely, still, if we have a joke that we thought was funny all week and nobody's laughing, maybe we're wrong, and you have to have the courage to throw out things that you've loved for a whole week. Or we'll realize, you know what, you don't need the middle of this scene. You don't need these 4 lines because we get from here to here, and you didn't really realize it until you've kind of heard it through other people's ears. And suddenly you're seeing the scene in a new way, and it's really informative. And also sometimes rather than cutting stuff, we'll take an opportunity to beat a joke and to try to do better. And some of the best jokes we've had on the show were just pitched out on the stage. And sometimes you need, like, radical solutions. I mean, we've had whole scenes that have just flat out died.
Most of the time, the audience is a wonderful barometer. You know, there are moments especially I remember in this season where you could hear a pin drop. They were so invested in the conflict and in the romance, actually. If they don't get a joke, then the writers all huddle after each scene and we go, all right, we got to rewrite this joke. This moment, we can cut these 2 lines. You don't need them. And we rewrite on the spot. On the night of a show, they are staying pretty darn close to what is now scripted. They do pitch, the cast definitely pitches jokes along the way during the course of the run-throughs and the rehearsals, and, you know, but there's not a lot of ad-libbing. We're not very good with surprises. We will talk about alternates that we can try. If people don't believe in a certain joke, we can try an alternate joke. The audience loves when they mess up. They enjoy that thoroughly. Because the cast curses, and it's the funniest thing ever, funnier than any joke we could ever write. It's like, I actually don't know what it's like. It's shocking to me that all they have to do is say a curse word when they forget a line, and the audience is absolutely hysterical. We've also found that there are 2 words that you can always say in any line that will make them laugh. Nipple and lesbian. Works every time. Just stick it in any line, it's funny.
I just thought he was nice, you know?
I remember hearing the theme from Welcome Back, Kotter on the radio, and Mike Post's theme from the Rockford Files, or the theme from the Monkees, and I thought, wouldn't that be amazing if, we could come up with a theme song that would transcend the show itself and actually be heard on the radio. Michael Skloff, who is my partner Marta's husband, did an amazing job on the Dream On theme that we all worked on together, so I wanted him to be involved. We needed to find a lyricist and songwriting partner. Allie Willis was a friend of mine who had written songs for Earth, Wind & Fire, the Pointer Sisters, and the Pet Shop Boys. And I thought that she would be terrific to put together with Michael to come up with the theme song. The final ingredient came through Allie's publisher with the suggestion of the Rembrandts, who really had that Beatle-like sound that we wanted to put into the opening title theme. We recorded this 45-second version, and I heard it, and I knew immediately it was a hit song. There was just no question in my mind. And when we approached the Rembrandts, they were a little reluctant at first to expand on the song and record a full-length version because they felt it didn't really represent what their music was doing at the time. Finally, 3 months later, when their new album was to come out, the record company insisted they weren't releasing the album without a full-length version of the Friends theme on it. And we went back into the studio. David and Marta wrote new lyrics for the song along with the Rembrandts, and we recorded it in a day. And so about a month later, I remember I was driving my car one day, and the radio was on, and all of a sudden, there's our theme song on the radio, and I'm hearing it for the first time, and I'm just driving and bopping along going, man, this is just like a dream come true. It was unbelievable.
I'm proud of the fact that we created a show that could grow, that wasn't limited by the parameters we laid down, but in fact, there were opportunities for characters to get deeper and richer and more interesting, and for new relationships to develop and evolve. That it hasn't just grown into, well, episode 14's a lot like episode 128. The characters have gone places and evolved, and I'm really proud of that.
Everybody took a risk on everybody with this show. It wasn't just us taking a risk with them. Courteney was the only name that anybody knew. Jennifer was doing another show at the time. They were all basically working actors. I know Matt was a little down on his luck at the time. They took a chance on us, too. We had only done Dream On, and we had, a modicum of success.
There was a real motor for the first season, which was Ross and Rachel. Well, it's really Ross. Rachel is oblivious until the last episode. And that was one of the hardest things in the world, because the ways we would contrive that Ross doesn't tell her. I mean, when you think about it, in the pilot, he says to her, "Is it okay if I ask you out?" And she says, "Yeah." In 24 weeks, he never does it. He's about to do it and a cat jumps on his back. He's about to do it and her ex comes in. And after a while, we're like, how long can we do this? And finally, at the end of the first season, we went, all right, we've got to change the dynamic. But it gave us something that everybody could root for. And you were so behind Ross. And it's amazing how many stories it yielded. The poker episode, you're so rooting for him. And it's a tricky episode because he desperately wants to win and he desperately loves her. And those two warring things going back and forth. And David was wonderful. And Jennifer was eminently lovable, so you believed it.
If I had to attribute the success to anything, it would be, first and foremost, luck. The six of them, these wonderful actors, an incredible writing staff every single season, and timing. It was the right time for this show and these people. It was just the right time. I remember after we did the pilot, NBC felt that it was too young, skewed too young, and that we needed an older character, and they were hoping we would put in, we called the character Pat the Cop, but it was the person who owned the coffee shop who could give them, elderly advice. And we kept saying, you don't need that. You don't need it. If these stories are universal enough, you won't need that. And luckily, we proved them wrong.
I said you had I said you had.
None of us were prepared for the incredible phenomenon which Friends became. When we started producing the show, we had only had a commitment for 6 episodes on the air. And all we were thinking about is, please, God, let us get picked up for the rest of the season. And I think that's all anybody was focusing on. I don't think there was a sense of, wow, we've got lightning in a bottle here. That was something that started to catch our attention as the ratings kept going up and ultimately surpassing the ratings of Mad About You, which preceded us. Most important part of the success of Friends has been the audience that watches the show every week. Without them, it would have been just limited to those first 6 episodes. So they're the ones we have to thank. Thank you for watching.